To help us analyze the current situation, we're joined from Paris by Majid Bouden, an international law professor, and from Tehran by Ibrahim Shir, an Iranian affairs expert. Thank you both for joining us. Let's start off with you, Mr. Ibrahim. Iranian president signed a law to suspend cooperation with the IAEA, hence barring international inspectors from Iranian facilities. From Tehran's perspective, is this a defensive move towards the actions that took place in the last month?
In the outset, I would like to greet you. Such Iranian step that could be interpreted as a reaction to step, not an action. Iran, since the negotiations in 2006 up till now, never made any reaction against the IAEA. On the contrary, made some sort of hit the cameras and cooperated with them in a larger scale, but as made by the IAEA Governing Council as a pretext for the strikes against Iran, and it was just interpreted as that just of an incitement of a change the work of the organization, the action that made by the US and Israel along with the breach of the IAEA.
Okay, let's get Dr. Bouden's perspective here. Now, the Pentagon has recently suggested that the US strikes have put back Iran's nuclear program by 1 to 2 years, and then there were other reports that said that it's only a few months, and Trump saying that it was obliterated, basically. How do you interpret these conflicting assessments, and what does this mean when it comes to how the Americans will deal with Iran?
Well, it's a fact that there is different interpretations, different statements, but here we have no evidence on these different statements. It's a matter of how we trust these informations. But the key question here is what to do in the next, as the next step, what to do in the future. There is, if we take into consideration the fact that the strike on the Iranian facilities are not acceptable under international law, either by Israel or by the US, if we take into consideration the fact that Israel is possessing the nuclear bomb, and this possession is illegal under international law. If we take that Iran is part of the non-proliferation treaty, and that also Iran has the 2015 agreement to let the AIAE to inspect the facilities like all other countries. So the International Agency of Atomic Energy is entitled to inspect, and here we are in a position that the government of Iran or the authorities of Iran has taken a decision to not allow the authority to inspect their facilities. Here we have 2 points. The first point, that the legal point, is under international law, how we can assess this position. And this position was taken by the parliament and then was authorized and executed by the executive authorities. And there is a principle under international law that a state must fulfill its international obligations. Mm-hmm. And if the state takes a decision by its organs, whether the parliament or the executive, the president, the supreme guide or whatever, this is not acceptable under international law because
I mean, I understand that legally speaking, this may not necessarily be the right course of action for the Iranians, but in their eyes, I suppose it would be that allowing the IAEA to inspect their facilities has been weaponized by the Americans and used against them. So this is the reasoning why they're leaving the non-proliferation treaty.
Of course, but here it's true that Iran had the right to protect itself, and we take into consideration also that Iran had the right to develop civil nuclear facilities. So this is it's not under discussion here. This decision is not will not lead to a solution. In fact, it was weaponized by the U.S. or by Israel doesn't give the right to Iran to stop the cooperation. Iran could put this question to this international body to say, we want guaranteed that your inspection will not be used by Israel or by other parties by the U.S. This is legitimate. That it will stop cooperation. There is other question. This will be weaponized by Israel or by others to say, oh, there is something cooking inside, and this is hiding, and then other countries will go against Iran. This is not a reasonable step. To want to go in a reasonable step, we have to warn that we have to put on the table the rights of Iran. We have the right. Iran can say that they have the right to develop civil researches.
But this was the deal. The deal that Trump scrapped basically was a path towards civil enrichment basically, and he tore it up. And then they struck the Iranian facilities, and now he's looking to reintegrate the same deal again, only in his name rather than Obama's name.
Yes, this is a fact, but this Iran had the possibility to defend itself on these legal bases and to protect itself against these further attacks, and have the public opinion and to have the other states and to put the question before the Security Council and to go before the International Court of Justice to develop this. But the fact that they will cut the relations with the AIAE is not acceptable under international. It gives rise to, and also when we see that today they have decided to criminate 2 French citizens for spying for Israel, why there is no evidence, it's escalating, and it come to a good end.
Okay, let's get Mr. Ibrahim's perspective here as well. Now, you heard what Dr. Bouden talked about and the idea of legalities according to international law. Now, based on the Iranian behavior in the past, in addition to the current rhetoric that the Iranian side is doing, do you believe that the U.S.-Israeli strikes will accelerate rather than deter Tehran's long-term nuclear ambitions? And has Trump's strikes only validated Iran's pursuit for a bomb as a survival tool? And do you agree with what Mr. Bouden said there?
The last thing to talk about is the international law. Does Israel, talking about the Iranian nuclear program, breaches or submits the international law? Does Israel admit that it's a nuclear facility, and even it strikes neither the international law or the other thing, or the American law, as its strikes it was against the Congress? Iran, its facilities submit to the international watchdogs. Its facilities has cameras for the IAEA. That's number one. Number two, Iran's enrichment reached 60%. Based on what? To withdraw of the nuclear agreement in 2008. That time, Iran said that will make escalated measures that will produce centrifuges of reactions from 20 to 25 reach to 60 based on measures exercised against Iran that breach the international law. So we cannot talk now about the international law and under the strike that is illegal. As we named before, following the American aggression, so we said Iran that might have taken measures such as political, technical, and militarily. This one is during the technical procedure to halt the cooperation with the IAA, but it's forever, but it's provided to for the agency not to take escalated measures and to have the watchdog is a neutral and a mediator. This is the conditions by Iran in order to return back to the IAEA.
Mr. Ibrahim, if I could follow up there. Now, you believe that basically when it comes to the application of international law, it's selective. So, given that this is your belief here, do you think that the Iranians have chosen to remove themselves from the IAEA not because they want to break international law, but rather it's a way to protect themselves from possible, further U.S. and Israeli strikes? Mr. Ibrahim, are you still with us? If you are, let me ask you again. Now, you just said that basically international law is very selective, and when it comes to the Iranians, international law applies, but when it comes to the Israelis, it doesn't. Now, is it your belief that the Iranians have decided to, leave the non-proliferation treaty based on the idea of protecting themselves, and will this actually escalate the tensions, in your opinion, or increase the possibility of nuclear arms race?
Iran specifically did not proceed to acquire nuclear weapons as it is prohibited in its doctrines in religion and the fatwa to prohibit the acquiring the nuclear weapons. And even America's administration talked in fact that Iran to be able to acquire or does not seek the nuclear weapons. And number two, exiting from the IAEA in order to protect itself from the IAEA and the upcoming regime, which supposedly in the future, if we have a Saudi nuclear program or from Moroccan or Turkish, such a program, Iran wishes to contain in it, to have the IAEA as a supportive in a way of the international agenda and the Western hegemony. Number two, with respect to respecting its nuclear facility, I think that America up till now they're not uncertain to that obliterated its nuclear facility. It might have been a setback for years or months, yes, but it is protected. The nuclear program might be to reproduce itself in the upcoming period. To go out from the IAEA is to protect the agency, its members, from not to be a new UN, as we all know, is submitted to the American veto. The UN is submitted to the fifth permanent members of the United Nations. Iran wishes to be for the agency to be aware of such an hegemony.
Okay, Dr. Bouden, let's talk about the contradictory statements again. Now, we spoke about this earlier when it comes to the statements coming out of the Pentagon. We've heard a series of contradicting assessments of the U.S. strikes on Iranian facilities. Now, what does this actually say about how the Trump administration perceives the legitimacy or the efficacy of these strikes? It seems that no one's quite sure what they've done.
First of all, the Trump administration, they don't use international law in their decisions. They think and they try to impose that if they have the force, they can use the force, and here they have used it to decide whatever they wish, and they put themselves out of the scope of international law. It doesn't mean that everybody must behave that way. If then we go there, we have no other grounds to even discuss, because and what Trump wanted to do is to make deals, and to make deal with Iran without referring to international law. This is a tendency which
This
is
is his tactic, isn't it, Dr. Bouden, where he bullies someone into basically taking the deal, like the U.S. tariffs that he's imposed across the world. This is also a tactic of pressuring the other side into a deal. Is this correct?
It's correct. It's a tactic, but in fact, it has been changed to a full. The Trump administration, and it's not because Trump is now in power. It's a long movement which is we can see in international law for several decades now, and they want to get out from international law to go to contracts, to go to conventions, to go to and international law is based on two things, mainly. It's based on international public customary law of state responsibility and international organizational responsibility. This is for centuries that we have been living under this. And then we have the treaties. The treaties are the codification of this international customary law. Now they want to go to treaties only, and they want to get out from international law. The weak countries, they have international customary law as the protection, as the shield, because they cannot negotiate treaties in a fair way. So the only reference, the only legal weapon they have is international customary law. Trump wanted, and for him, a lot of people in the U.S. administration. We have seen it also with Putin administration. And with China, they want to get rid of international customary law without saying it, and they want to have deals. The deals, they say, Iran, let's make a deal. We don't international law. What is the state of power? What is the balance of power? And we make a deal. Here, all the countries are in a weak position. And it is in the interest of Iran as a very ancient civilization with the 90 million people, with around 100 million people, with several centuries of history, to stick to international law and to say, we have problems. We need to develop our civil enrichment. They're entitled to do it. Nobody can question it. But this matter can be weaponized. So they cannot cut the relations with the watchdog, with the controlling authority, but they can put conditions and put on the table the fact why Israel has had the bomb. Nobody is questioning this, and this they can have an echo around the world. The second thing is, what are the limits of the control? What are the framework of the control? And here they can have a lot of countries and a lot of public opinion beside them. But if they go and they just stop the talks, this is a bad sign.
Yes.
And perception also of Iran here, with the regime of Iran as it is not a positive perception, and it could rise to that there is something sneaky going under the table, and then they can open the door
for more attacks. Yes. If we could get this Ibrahim's perspective here as well when it comes to this negotiating process. Now, I'm sure you've heard Dr. Bouden talking about the idea of treaties rather than looking at international law. Given what he said, do you still think that there is a possibility that Iran and US will resume negotiations, especially that Iran has suspended dealing with the international inspectors now that we've taken international law off the table? Is there still a possibility for negotiations?
I think that the Iranian resolution is related to the IAEA. It has 2 points. Firstly, is to some sort of a reaction to what the IAEA made against Iran. Two, which is important, is a play card relied by Iran through the trajectory of the American negotiations. Who will enter the negotiation, but will ask from you another thing. As to do so, Iran has increased its share of going back to the IAEA that you've already Iran has already exited the IAEA because of the American aggression, and through Iran will go towards the negotiation positively. Iran has no problem with that, but the negotiations will lead to a real agreement or based on a principle, and then another president will come after Trump and withdraw itself again. So Iran wishes to say the seriousness of keeping the deal. Iran has a card. So to play with or to bargain with into the negotiations, and now the game is open for both parties.
All right, Dr. Bouden, now do you agree that even if the negotiations take place now between both sides, and they do reach a deal, that there's still the possibility that the next president comes in could tear up the deal just like Trump did?
Well, Iran has no interest to have a deal directly with the U.S. With the Trump administration. In fact, because it's in a weak position now, the strike was the military strikes, the Israeli and the American, was to weaken Iran. And Iran has the deep interest, their population interest, their country's interest to bring in the negotiations the European community, the European Union, UK, Canada, Australia, the Arab countries, because they are interested in the solution in the Middle East, because we have to stop this nuke in the area, and we have to have a Middle East free of nuclear weapons, including the Israeli weapons, and to put all these questions on the table, and to have those people as their allies if there is a serious way to come to a solution, and also to have a cooperation under the normal conditions.
Yes.
With the controlling authority, the International Agency for Atomic Control of Atomic Energy. Here, there is a very important point that this controlling agency is an international organization, and as an international organization, it is governed by the international law of public international law of customary public international law of international organizations responsibility. This codification of the United Nations. Yes. Here, this watchdog has the obligation under this customary law to have fair and equitable treatment towards Iran. And here, if there is any violation, they can take this. They can file a case before the international justice. They can go to the General Assembly of the United Nations, but we have to remain in the framework of
international law. Okay, Mr. Ibrahim, now the head of the UN nuclear watchdog stated that the US strikes did not completely destroy Iran's nuclear program, and that Tehran could resume uranium enrichment in a matter of months. How is this assessment viewed in Tehran?
in order to Iran that have three categories in the Iranian society. One is supportive and one is an opposition, and the third one is informative for a reform category. Even the opponent found meaning that Americans has no credibility in dialogue, and even the Iranian people opposing the regime is supported in Iran. But it is, they say that it should have an open window for one reason, that the sanctions won't be able to be lifted without a dialogue. Back to your question, actually, no one on earth to have a confirmation of what happened in the three Iranian facilities, Bouden, Natanz, and Isfahan, but the American. No
Yes.
one can determine this matter. The Iranian only can confirm if the reactors were intact or not.
Yes.
But we should rely on several factors. Firstly, the statement of the supreme leader that the reactors were intact, uranium is in good conditions, and we may
Yes.
back to resume.
So
Second,
your point there is clear, Mr. Ibrahim, that basically only the Iranians know the consequences of these strikes. Anyway, we're out of time, so I apologize for cutting you off there. That was Ibrahim Shir, the Iranian affairs expert, and Majid Bouden, an international law professor. Thank you both for your insights, and thank you for joining me here.